It's news from heaven. The arrangement of the heavens and the hells changed after judgments. And that's a headline that's worthy of attention right by itself. But it's actually even more important than it sounds, because this show is called News from Heaven. And that is because we really do get our news from heaven and hell. News in not the stuff that you find when you go look up stuff on the internet, or if you've ever seen a newspaper at the bottom of your driveway and wondered, what's this thing doing here? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the headlines inside. Don't we always, as we go through life, have an event happens and we have a breaking news story that's a take on what that event means? Why did this person say that thing? The news, the things that impel us, the thought pieces in there, they come out of heaven and hell. Heaven and hell are the mechanism on a grand scale that God, am I getting heavy quickly here? That God uses to create consciousness, the consciousness that we all participate in. So whenever something changes there, it matters to us. And what we always do here is try to look at, so how can we get more of those heaven news stories in? Because you know that you get in this frame of mind in life when you're chill about things that were bothering you before. When you feel the kind of love and compassion and joy that you want to feel, when the things that should be priorities feel like priorities, we know that state and we know the other state when we're confused and can't get certain things out of our heads and have a negative interpretation of everything and just wonder, why am I struggling with this right now? Those are the different sides coming at us. Why? What's the bigger picture? Well, that's what we're about to find out here. Okay, and we're going to thrash around with this because Apocalypse Explained is one of the more technical books in general. Any of the exegesis stuff is, and this is an older translation, which I have a lot of affection for, but has some real, almost what's been called Swedenborgianese in there. That there's very, it can be a little dense. You may not find it at all. I am joyfully looking forward to bushwhacking here with you. Am I sounding critical of this translation? I am not. I have a great debt of gratitude to this translation. And let's go and see if we can get through it. In the spiritual world, by which both the heavens and the hells are meant, the arrangement is such that the heavens are like expanses, one above the other, and under the heavens is the world of spirits, and under this are the hells, one below another. Oh no, that's great. Perfectly clearly stated. And important to know, should anybody be asking you for directions in the spiritual world. And if someone says, where do I go in the spiritual world? You'll say, oh, by the spiritual world, do you mean the different layers of heaven and the different layers of hell, this entire thing, everything that's the realm past physicality? Okay. And you say, well, if you go up, you get heavens. Let's say there's 1, 2, 3 here. And if you go down, you get hells, because he's saying there's a world of spirits, one above the other. Under the heavens is the world of spirits. Oh, yeah, right. Let's put this as world of spirits. This whole thing, again, you may say, hey, you just contradicted yourself. What I'm talking about is, here you have, where are we even talking about? Spiritual world is this whole thing, right? And then world of spirits. Oh, this is why I couldn't find it. It's like across a line. World of spirits, that's this middle part. That's where you go after you die. And above it are 1, 2, 3 heavens and 1, 2, 3 hells. Now, this is actually more simplistic than what Swedenborg describes the reality to be. It's not just like, wow, I'm here in the world of spirits and I'm looking up and I can see the floor of that heaven there. This is much more spread out and integrated than it's sounding just here. Swedenborg talks about a particular mountain in the spiritual world can have communities in it, that at the top you can have communities that are in heaven, in these various heavens, and then in the bottom you can have a cave or a crag or something underneath, which is where people who live in a mindset that corresponds to that darkness find themselves living. Doesn't mean that they see it as a cave. It means that they'll see it according to their own state of mind. But if you look at it as it really is, it's like this. Okay, that's a pretty good start. Influx from the Lord takes place according to this successive arrangement. Influx being the emanating divine I should really finish this sentence. Thus, through the inmost heaven into the middle, through this into the ultimate, and from these in their order into the hells which lie beneath. So God is the only source of everything, of life, the love and wisdom that allow us to live. So we have God coming through here and from there into there. This is going and moving successively, differing as the different states of mind and these different people who inhabit these different regions are, much like light going through the atmosphere. Some of it bounces off. I don't even know how that works, but it changes as it goes through the atmosphere. Then that goes down into heaven, which then flow down from there into hells. And so by the time you get down here, it's very different than it was up there, because the life of people who have loved what is this hellish is very different than the life of people who are loving what is heavenly. Hellish being the destruction of others for your own enjoyment, heaven being the serving and blessing of others for your own enjoyment, really, or for their enjoyment, which becomes your enjoyment after you learn to love people as much or more than you love your own gratification. Okay. The world of spirits is in the midst, right here, and receives influx from both heavens and the hells, each one there according to the state of his life. Okay, we got to amend this a little bit, or I would say expand this a little bit, because don't we hear I show this as the descending order of life, right? But they're saying that the world of spirits in here, actually, once this has been metabolized and processed here, there is a feeding back into the world of spirits from hell, and a feeding back into the world of spirits from heaven. So that's why, and our physical world is actually directly in touch with this. So this is an explanation of why you and I find ourselves in this state where there is some heavenly good stuff and some hellish obstructive stuff mixing in our minds, and why we have good and bad days and good and bad thoughts. Okay, the world of spirits is in their midst, I just said that, but the arrangement of the heavens and the hells underwent changes from one judgment to another, for the reason that the men who passed from the earths, of whom the heavens and the hells are constituted, were various in their affections, some being more or less spiritual or internal, and some more or less natural or external. It goes without saying, this is a blanket term for men and women, and there's so many great headlines in this piece of text. This arrangement of the heavens and the hells underwent changes. When you think about things like the afterlife or heavens, and how heaven and hell are set up in opposition to each other, or in some kind of fashion that allows both to exist, you definitely think of this whole thing, I'll draw another one of these, as static, right? It doesn't change. But there is a dynamism. This is an ongoing project of God. This is not, the purpose of God is not, I want to create a couple of buckets that people will fit in. This whole thing has a purpose which is evolving and going according to some grand plan that God has, which is way above our pay grade. And so God is continually tinkering with it, tweaking it, but with much more purpose and competency than those terms seem to imply. That's one headline. The other is that the heavens and hell change. There's this thing we call from one judgment to another. Swedenborg says that the judgment is a sorting. So if you have this thing over here, I just can't stay away from this drawing right now. It's just so great. This whole thing here is a mechanism for this process, of course, and it can get clogged up in certain ways. You can have this balance get to be too there can be too much force from hell that actually starts to push heaven out of its ability to provide the necessary service. Just think about a human body that starts to get out of whack in various areas. So a judgment is like, we're cleaning you out. This is we're gonna get in there and remove whatever's going on. I was almost gonna say colonoscopy, but I thought that's too gross, so I won't say it. And so that is the reason that that's happening is because people who come from our earth, remember I talked about our earth before here and didn't draw it? There it is. Okay, get every continent on there. Don't ask me which is which. People here, and really, he says the Earths. And Swedenborg is a proponent of a universe that has many centers of sentient life in it. He calls all of these human. Not necessarily that they're all the same biological species, but they all have the love and the capacity to receive love and wisdom from the Lord. We're all God's children. People are coming in here, right? And because this whole thing is predicated on the mindsets of the people in it, so as you add more and more of people of different kinds of mindsets, the makeup and the balance and the amount of dissolved sodium in the water changes, and so the whole makeup of this thing changes. Some being more or less spiritual or internal, some more or less natural or external. So yeah, we are shallower or more deep, and that changes what the overall dynamic is. And because the Lord does evil to no one, but good to all, therefore he permitted those who had lived a moral and apparently spiritual life in externals from custom and habit in the world, however interiorly they were conjoined with hell, to form for themselves in the world of spirits a similitude of heaven in various places. That's a good size sentence, and I hope you didn't miss this part because, oh no, that's not the part. I hope you missed that part, but what I hope you didn't miss was the line right above it. Because the Lord does evil to no one. That's because the Lord is love. And I know that the concept of God, and especially the concept of God, once you start throwing in things like heaven and hell, immediately raises this, like, how can God be good? How can God be good if God is putting certain people in hell? Isn't that just a vindictive, some kind, like you can find all kinds of analogs in people who are military leaders or dictators, or to take your enemies and do away with them. Anybody does that, and we don't necessarily call those people good. So if God is doing this, what's going on? Like, aren't we supposed to be trying to rise above revenge and that? But God does it. The Lord does evil to no one. The Lord is not interested in harming anyone, and that means that God is not going to let anybody slip through the cracks. Is not going to be consigning somebody to eternal torture, and just, okay, well, there you go. The Lord is doing evil to no one. Without that, the whole thing falls apart. Because how can we go around and say, we're going to do whatever you want, God, and know that this whole picture crushes some people? Even if those people did a bunch of harmful stuff, they're still people. They're still, there's got to be a better way. There has got to be something nobler and more angelic. And that's exactly what we're being told God does. But good to all. So, and what's going on here is he says, so look, there's some people who externally seem like very nice people, even though they really had some very twisted motives, but they kept themselves under control and weren't harming people, and so they were allowed to actually occupy places, let's say, in certain parts of heaven, certain parts of the world of spirits, that really weren't in line with what they would and could do if all restraints were out of line. But these people were causing problems, starting to gum things up, starting to introduce harm in, because there was just this connection with hell, and hell is absolutely interested in destroying everything that exists here. So hell starts to get up in here and say, why don't you do this? And this was creating unsafe conditions in the places that needed to be safe, not just for the people here, but to create this balance that allows these people who are bent on destruction of each other and everyone and everything else to have a safe structure in which they can continue to exist. Because if it was just left up to that destructive tendency, we would destroy ourselves. So, for the good of the whole, there needed to be something done, because everything was in the balance, as they say. To form for themselves in the world of spirits a similitude of heaven in various places, so they could get together and have communities where they got to be who they wanted to be. And then the heavens above them and the hells below them were so arranged that their interiors, through which they were conjoined with hell, might as far as possible be kept closed, while their exteriors, through which they were conjoined with the ultimate heaven, could be kept open. So, last time over here, these people, right, can behave very well, but are nursing motives that would do harm to all kinds of people if they were let go. So God is trying to make it so, all right, I'm going to let your desire to live a civil life. We're just going to focus on the flowing in of heaven to that external part of your mind that can accept that, and try to restrict the flow of hell that's trying to get you all to act out on these motives. So that was working for a while, but I don't think it lasts. And then it was provided that the higher heavens should not flow in immediately, for by such immediate influx their interiors, which were infernal, would be opened, and their exteriors, which were apparently spiritual, closed. For the influx of the higher heavens is into the interiors, which are the Spirit's own, but not into the exteriors, which are not really their own. This is a huge amount of work going in to making sure that these people can be treated as well as possible. You'd think if God is really love, if God is really love for everyone, does evil to no one, just if there's these people that have this desire to do things that are not heavenly, then just shower them with love. Just bring in everything from the highest heaven. Bathe them in that love, mutual love, right? And then that will make it so that they're good. But Swedenborg is here saying that actually it's much more complex than that. Just like in a human body, as I was making the comparison before, and I talked about sodium for some reason earlier in this episode, so I'll say there are times when I think you can have a deficiency, a salt deficiency, sodium deficiency. There's stuff you can have a deficiency in. Let's say it's potassium. Let's say it's vitamin D. I always like to go back to that example in my limited knowledge of nutrition, because I know that you can have a vitamin D deficiency. And if so, let's flood you with vitamin D. We'll get you on supplements. You go outside and the sun will hook you up. But if you have enough, if you don't have a need for vitamin D, or your body can't handle it right then, and I give you a bunch of vitamin D, it's toxic. So it is with the influx from the highest heaven. The stuff there is that complex. So just to say, look, if I'm in a state where I have inside me, I am clinging to this, like I am going to tear this person down to get where I need to go. I am going to take revenge on anyone who doesn't do what I want them to do, or whatever it is. And we say, well, here's some influx from the highest heaven. The highest heaven communicates with what's deep in your heart. So it'll push that out, and then you can't, if you're acting from that, you can't be in society with other people, because those other people say, wait, get him out of here, because he's trying to do all that stuff. So God is like, all right, I'm going to make this workaround so that heaven itself gets blocked off a little bit here, so it's not going so much into these people, so that we can just have their exteriors active, and then for a while, for as long as possible, you're in as happy a state as possible, which is always what God is doing with all the evil people happen to latch onto, or I would say get tricked into loving. And right, and then it was provided, I just read this part, which is, but when such apparent heavens had increased, and here we go, here's when the tipping point is, when such apparent heavens had increased to such an extent that the influx from the hells had begun to prevail over the influx from the heavens, and that consequently, if we're going to make a move, there better be a good reason. Consequently, the ultimate heaven, which was conjoined with them, had begun to totter. Yeah, that heaven, if that part of heaven, which, by the way, as we were saying, is the mechanism by which we get good and bad thoughts. That if you think about heaven, sure, but that crucial load-bearing beam in the infrastructure that allows for life itself to exist is almost going to break. We got a problem. And what happens when we have a problem? We need to sort things. Then the last judgment was at hand. And by degrees, a separation of the evil from the good in those new apparent heavens took place. And this by immediate influx from the higher heavens, and by such influx their interiors, which were infernal, were opened, and their exteriors, which were apparently spiritual, were closed, as stated above. Okay, we all got to look at where we really are and get people to where still for people who have God doesn't do evil to anyone. So if you have this stuff in your interiors, it's not that God is like, now I'm really going to nail you for it. It's like, look, we're going to get you, put you now in a place which, sure, maybe it's hell. But to people who love that kind of stuff, hell is the place where they are the happiest. And the place by which they're not going to destroy heaven. From these things, it is now clear why the temple appeared and the ark in the temple. Now we're talking about the imagery from the Bible that corresponds to this whole process, which signifies the divine truth by which the higher heavens were enlightened, in order that from them influx might pass into the lower parts where the evil had their abode. From this influx, it resulted that in the lower parts where the evil were, lightnings were seen, and voices and thunders heard. Also, that there was a great earthquake, and hail fell. This is some of that imagery that seems so strange in the Bible. This is actually describing like the spiritual side of this kind of sorting. The influx out of the heavens, that is, through the heavens from the Lord, is nothing else but an influx of the love of good and of affection for truth. But with the evil, it is turned into such things as correspond to their evils, and to the falsities therefrom, or as correspond to their love of evil and affection for falsity. And because the conflicts and disturbances of thought and reasonings from evil and falsities concerning the goods and truths of the church in which they were correspond to lightnings, voices, and thunders, therefore they are here signified by these. And that is where we get the Lord doing evil to no one. Because if you're really saying, look, how can stuff like lightning and thunder and earthquakes, if we're getting down here into the hell side of things, how is that love coming out of God? And what Swedenborg is saying is that you have the love of good and truth coming out here. But as it moves through people who love different kinds of things, it gets more and more distorted, so that there it clashes with the love of evil and falsity. If you go into a room, think about how we are when we're in our most triggered, combative, ego, self-serving state, and everybody's in our way and everyone's annoying us. Think about bringing, hey, look, everybody's a person, we gotta try, we gotta kumbaya. How does that, assuming you don't have some zealous, righteous reason to be indignant because of some evil that's being committed or something, right? When we're the problem to an extent, how do we react to that thought? How does a community that is organized around the love of exploiting others react to the idea that everybody is equally valuable and should be loved, and that it is wrong, that it's fundamentally, that it's fundamentally wrong to exploit people? How, if a community gathered around the idea that they of the love and enjoyment of exploiting people, how do they react to the idea that it's fundamentally wrong to exploit people? It's an earthquake. It feels like hostility, but that is love, and that's why we have this clash. And that's the news from heaven. Okay, how did it go? We said we were going to get through that, and I loved it. I thought it was fun. But I got to know if you guys think it was fun too. Is this clear? Is this helpful? Is this anything you can apply? You got to leave it in the comments there so that we know. And I hope that if you do, you are taking these concepts and they are useful, or they are letting you bring light into the world in some way, let us know about that too, because we want to know that this is doing something that makes the world inside us better and the world out there better. So, great talking to you about it here. See you soon.